not just, and to this day, if you shop online and you're looking up equipment finance, 90+% of the equipment finance calculators on websites out there, they'll show you a payment or they'll show you a rate, but it's based on a fairy tale. It's either, sometimes it's a total lie and they'll say you're going to get a 5% rate when you can't even get that on a mortgage. But when they do have a legitimate rate, most of the time they're imputing something that's very far from the situation of most business owners that are shopping on the internet to finance equipment for their business, particularly if they're a startup business. In fact, a lot of times the payment quoted will be half of what someone could reasonably expect if they were in some of the more challenging situations. Yeah.
Welcome to the Build to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe the key to scaling and compounding your wealth in life starts every single day with the mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you scale and compound your wealth in life so you can give more or all of it away to help MVPs. My name is Brett Swartz. Each and every episode, we're joined by the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, or billionaires, and they share their secrets and insights with us so we can all level up and make a bigger impact. I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of the Las Vegas area. He has over 20 years of experience in finance, including working as a financial analyst for a business valuation firm and running a marketing company that specializes in marketing financial products. Today, we're going to be talking about financing and helping your small business with vehicle and equipment financing. So it's kind of a niche thing that our guest is going to bring to the table. Please welcome to the show with me, Rob Misheloff. Rob, how are we doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Brett.
Excellent. For our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us just a little more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started the company about a dozen years ago, and the reason for that, I was running a direct marketing firm from 2003 to 2013. And our main product was direct mail, which by 2013 was not really a viable product anymore. And we were mostly marketing for a niche product called reverse mortgages. And a gentleman that had worked for us and had moved on went to go work at an equipment finance company. And he was shooting hoops with someone who was still working for us. And he said, "So you're doing this equipment finance thing now? How are you guys getting your leads?" He says, "Well, they're sending out direct mail and people call us." I said, "Wow, well, maybe I ought to start direct mailing for these equipment finance guys." So we start doing that, and I cold call and I get into some of the larger shops. And I realized through that process that, and let me back up for a sec, because the interesting about the reverse mortgage industry was there wasn't a lot of scammers. Most of the people, every single business in the world has a few bad apples. But what was unique about the reverse mortgage industry, the vast majority of the people in that industry were good people. They were doing it so they could help people not have to choose between food and medicine, and they believed in the product. And I get in to start talking to these guys that are doing small business loans and equipment financing, and I find out it's an unregulated market, and a lot of the folks in the market, they weren't being honest with their customers about the rates and the terms, and they were actually proud of it. They were bragging to me that you can use smoke and mirrors because guys that drive trucks and guys that pour asphalt, they're good at what they do, but they don't know anything about finance. They don't know anything about numbers, so you can tell them whatever. And they don't have lawyers, so none of their contracts are reviewed, and there's all these shady things they can do. And I said to myself, there's a lot of ways to make a living, and I'm not going to make a living helping these guys rip off small business owners. It just doesn't speak to me. And so I started our website, smarterfinanceusa.com, and basically told all the shifty things these guys told me, and said, these are the things I heard. This is what's going on in the industry. And by the way, these are the real rates. And this is what you'll actually pay, not just, and to this day, if you shop online and you're looking up equipment finance, 90+% of the equipment finance calculators on websites out there, they'll show you a payment or they'll show you a rate, but it's based on a fairy tale. It's either, sometimes it's a total lie and they'll say you're going to get a 5% rate when you can't even get that on a mortgage. But when they do have a legitimate rate, most of the time they're imputing something that's very far from the situation of most business owners that are shopping on the internet to finance equipment for their business, particularly if they're a startup business. In fact, a lot of times the payment quoted will be half of what someone could reasonably expect if they were in some of the more challenging situations. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. All right. So speaking with Rob Misheloff, everybody, you can learn more about what he's doing by going to smarterfinanceusa.com, smarterfinanceusa.com. So I think the first part of this conversation is really knowing that there's better actors and then there's worse actors in this world, and you want to make sure you're working with somebody who's going to give you an equitable deal on the financing of equipment. And so it sounds like that's where your focus is right now. So if someone's listening to this and they have a business and they're saying, hey, I need to finance my equipment, what is kind of step one or the first part of wisdom that you would share with them?
So the first step is, a lot of times when you're shopping for equipment, the first two things you should do if you're looking to finance is not call and not shop on the internet for financing. The first thing to do, a lot of times the people selling the equipment will have 0% or near 0% deals that your bank or a private equipment finance broker can't compete with. And so that should always be the first step. And it's funny, we'll have people who've gotten it offered close to 0% from their seller, and they call us to price shop it, and we say, well, we're not going to give you a negative interest rate, so I think you should go with that. But second step, if they don't have in-house financing, you don't qualify, then go to your bank. And because that's typically, if you qualify, that's going to be your next cheapest option. And if the bank says no, and they usually do, but you never know, and we sometimes hear deals where we're like, well, that's pretty good, and we can't touch that. Third option is a private lender like ourselves.
You know what the worst thing to do is when you're selling a business? Paying huge capital gains taxes. In fact, they're about 20 to 50% of the sale. And if your client is selling, whether you're a business broker, M&A advisor, financial advisor, they have a large capital gains tax problem. And guess what? We have a solution. We build capital gains tax solutions for sellers of highly appreciated assets, including real estate, including businesses and other assets. And we want to encourage you to take action today to learn about what solutions are available. So think about a business, think about real estate, think about other assets that have at least $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain, and the sale is going to result in 20 to 50% in tax. So what can you do? Well, you can build a capital gains tax solution with our team. Go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com or click on the link below to get started. Okay, excellent. So that makes sense. So making sure that you understand that most of the time, or a lot of the time, if you can try to buy direct, get financing direct, it's going to be lower than what anyone else can provide. That makes sense. They want to sell their assets. So starting with, are there any great deals from direct? And then step two is then finding those who are more competitive like yourself. Is that what you're saying?
Well, next you go to your bank.
Okay.
Because folks will sometimes come to us and say, well, my bank offered me this, and he said, that's a pretty good deal, you should take that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then step three would be then now go shop and find.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's very rare that an equipment finance company can compete with bank or dealer financing. It's just not our space.
Okay, got it. And okay, so now someone comes to you. Maybe you can give a recent equipment financing deal that you helped someone with, right? What did it look like? What were they purchasing? You know, for what, and how do they qualify? And what was some of the general rate and term?
Sure, I'll give you a couple of examples because there's a pretty wide range. And for example, we recently dealt with an auto shop owner that needed to purchase a couple of lifts for their garage. And it was a little bit of a tricky deal because they weren't buying from a vendor. They were buying from a private party. You know, it's kind of like if you found some equipment on Craigslist or wherever. And that's an inherently risky deal for a lender. The vast majority of, well, I wouldn't say the majority, but about 45% of equipment defaults are due to breakdown. You know, you can't earn money from the equipment, so it becomes difficult to pay the note. And in this case, it's a couple of lifts. It took us a few days to find somebody willing to take that deal, but fortunately, the owner had good credit and a few years in business, so we were able to get a very reasonable rate, very comparable to bank terms, even though it took us a day or two longer than it normally takes us. And that's an interesting thing right there, because for us, a long deal takes a few days to get approved, whereas a lot of times you're going to your bank, it could take weeks to just to get a denial. Now, on the other side, so the really challenging deals, for instance, we had someone call in who was a startup buying a used semi-truck with challenged credit. And so that's, in terms of risk, you go from, well, it's used equipment from a private party to, wow, startup business, lousy credit, buying a used semi-truck. And so that was one of your more high rate, high down payment kind of things. And it's interesting because a lot of folks in the industry kind of shy away from telling somebody, this is going to be high down payment and this is going to be high rate. So let's think about this. Let's work the numbers. How much money are you going to bring in from this asset? Because I'm going to give you a lousy deal. And the reason why I have to do that is because you represent very, very high risk to the lender. And there's no way to sugarcoat this. This is high rate financing. So let's look at this and make sure it makes sense, because I don't want you to come back and say, this didn't do a good thing for me. This didn't do a good thing for my business. And that's really what's most important.
Yeah, I think it's important to take the approach of finding ways to talk people out of the deal if there's any other ways, like the bank financing or the financing direct. But in these situations, even like, hey, are you willing to do this? Because it's really got to be an investment and not an expense. And if the interest way exceeds your investment for your business and what this is going to produce in income, yeah, you don't want a 90 days, they're knocking on your door, upset, and you're like, well, this is what you signed up for. And so I think that's really important for transparency and clarity. We're speaking with Rob Misheloff, everybody. You can find him by going to his website, and that's smarterfinanceusa.com, smarterfinanceusa.com. If you're looking to expand for equipment financing for your business, you can check him out. Okay, that makes sense. And then I guess it'll depend. So part of the answer to your question would probably be interest rates. It seems like will be based upon your creditworthiness, right? The equipment you're buying, right? And your business, track record, probably those things can all go into play. And I don't know if they look at business plan, but that's the general way that people, or that banks will, or the people that you finance with will finance. But the general terms and the general interest rates, or is it pretty broad, or what do you think, Rob, on that?
It's an enormous range. The main things that are looked at, and except in very rare cases, we're not looking at business plans. We're usually not looking at financials if the deal is under $250,000. But the main things are how long have you been in business? And 2 years is ideal to get out of that startup range, because startup rates are nasty because of the risk. What is both your personal and business credit? If you don't have business credit, it defaults to personal. And importantly, lenders look at, do you have installment history? And ideally for your business, if not for your business, have you ever financed a car? And that helps tremendously. And then if the credit's a little challenging, you maybe ask for bank statements, and lenders are going to look at, well, how much cash flow do you have, and also how much do you have left over? What are your ending balances in the last 3 months of your bank account? And importantly, are the ending balances enough to make the payment?
That makes sense. Okay, perfect. That's the list. Yeah. Right. How long you been in business? Right. What's your personal business credit? Do you have installment history? Have you financed a car? What is your actual net cash flows per month? Right. Just getting a sense for that and making sure that the numbers line up. That makes sense. What other questions or other ways that people could prepare if they wanted to work with you, Rob, that they can be doing?
The best thing is to just call. And whether it's us or somebody else, a competent lender can tell in the first 5 minutes, do you have a shot? Realistically, what's the range going to be? And what's going to be needed? And there's not really a lot of preparation that has to go into it, because it's predicated on what's your credit and how long have you been in business. And then to a lesser extent, what are you buying and what's your industry? For example, there are some industries that we just can't do. Nobody wants to touch them. Startup food trucks, nobody's going to buy that paper. We get calls from guys that want to do crypto mining. That's not really something lenders want to invest in. Marijuana grows. I guess technically we can do them, but they're so challenging. We tell people to go find someone that specializes in that, because it's kind of illegal and no one wants to touch that stuff. But real businesses, where there's yellow iron construction equipment, a truck, an urgent care clinic, an auto garage. Those are going to be much easier than your super high risk industries, like, for instance, a restaurant. Restaurants are challenging. We had one lender tell us that the startup restaurant default rate was on the order of 60%.
Wow.
Yeah, so very, very challenging business. And we get a lot of folks that come to us wanting to start a restaurant, and we can almost never help them, unfortunately. But someone wants to start a business in construction, auto repair, trucking, someone with a medical degree buying medical equipment. Those are all relatively straightforward things to do.
Excellent. We're going to move to the lightning round just in a second, but I want to just kind of thank our sponsor, Capital Gains Tax Solutions. If you're in a large exit coming up, businesses, Bitcoin, real estate, multiple $1 million of gains, and you want to defer capital gains tax, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. In fact, it's actually my company and what we specialize in, so it's kind of our commercial for our own podcast here. But yeah, if a large business exit, large real estate, or if you're a large stock position and you want to defer tax, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. You ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
All right, knowing what you know now, if you can go back to your 20-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget make sure to tell yourself to do?
I'd go into this industry. Much
Excellent.
easier than any other industry I've been in, and it's fun.
Cool. I also love it. Question number 2, what's the number one book you've recommended the most in the past year?
In the past year, Probably Liar's Poker. I love that book.
Excellent. Question number 3. What are you most curious about right now?
AI. What's it going to do? How to use it to get an advantage.
Excellent. With that being said, number 1 AI tool that you're using right now?
Just Claude.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to be the front runner right now.
Yeah.
Next question. Number 1 leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
Leadership quote or theme. Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful.
With that being said, just maybe a little longer answer for investing. What do you like to invest in, and where do you feel there's some opportunity right now?
You know, lately I've been investing in precious metals. That I think is a huge opportunity, because the dollar is not getting, I mean, in the short term it's getting stronger, but long term the dollar is not going to get stronger. We are spending, the U.S. is running, was a $2 trillion deficit, and the debt is growing. I don't see a way out of this. So cash, I keep telling my wife, cash is trash.
Yeah. With that being said, precious metals, what's your thoughts on Bitcoin?
I don't understand it, and I don't invest in things I don't understand. To me, it sounds like voodoo, but I also know that I don't know everything, and I could very well be wrong. So I'm not going to short Bitcoin, but I don't invest in Bitcoin.
Got it. For the precious metals, do you have like a precious metal advisor, or do you have like a group that you, or a place that you like to use? It seems like it's a little more alternative, but what's the best way you found to invest into precious metals?
So what I personally do is I use the indexes. I buy paper silver, paper gold, and ETFs for the mining stocks.
I love it. There you go. Yeah, keep it simple. Excellent. Last question, and we'll kind of wrap it up. After all your success, helping all the people you helped build the businesses you've built, how do you best keep a mindset of stewardship over ownership?
You know, we've got 20 people and growing that work here for us, and we're here for them more than for us. And ultimately, if you keep your employees happy, they'll keep you happy. And so and same with our customers. You treat people right, you'll be treated right. And that's kind of the mantra we use throughout business, is just don't be a jerk.
Love it, Rob. Hey, Rob, it's been more than a pleasure having you on the show. And thank you for breaking down the commitment, the equipment finance world, and thank you for helping businesses grow, right, and invest into their companies, and continue to help the American economy go round and round here. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, one last time, what's the best place to find you?
Website, smarterfinanceusa.com.
Awesome. And I also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Build to Billings podcast. We're also streaming on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast and YouTube channels. And we're on this journey with you to scale from millions to billions, to make a huge impact and make a huge difference for MVPs, the most vulnerable people in this world. I encourage you to take action today. If you have a business and you're looking to finance equipment, reach out to Rob. And if you have a large business or real estate or Bitcoin or any other asset that's selling, it has massive capital gains taxes. It could be gold, and you want to defer that tax, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to build a plan to exit and defer that tax, diversify the wealth. That's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Appreciate everyone listening or watching out there, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Bye now.